Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back to ancient Rome, to walk quietly alongside a young slave named Lucius. Through his eyes, we'll explore the rhythm of daily life, the soft sighs beneath grand marble halls, and the small sparks of hope that flicker even in the darkest shadows. Before we start this gentle journey, if you enjoy the story, please rate it and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next parts. The sun was barely stirring when Lucius awoke. A faint pink glow seeped through the cracks of the small wooden shutter of his cramped quarters. The world outside was still hushed, wrapped in a cool silence that only moments ago had belonged to dreams. Lucius lay there for a few breaths, savoring the fragile calm before the day would sweep him away again. He knew the routine well, carved into his bones like the well-worn stone steps he'd tread countless times. From the modest slave quarters nestled in the shadow of the Domus Magnus, the grand household of his master, Lucius would soon join the hum of the city stirring to life. But first, there was the quiet moment before the noise. Lucius stretched his weary limbs and reached for the worn tunic folded neatly on the edge of his wooden cot. The fabric was rough, coarse against his skin, but it was the only garment he had. As he dressed, the scent of olive oil lamps flickered in the dim room, casting dancing shadows that seemed to whisper secrets from the past. The household was vast, an intricate web of chambers, kitchens, courtyards, and halls that echoed with the footsteps of those above, unaware of the lives beneath their notice. Lucius's tasks were many and varied, from preparing the morning bread to tending the flame that warmed the atrium. Though small, each duty was a vital thread in the tapestry of the household. But beyond the tasks, beyond the weight of chains that were not always visible, there was a pulse to the day that Lucius felt deep within, a quiet resilience, a hidden strength that carried him through. He paused briefly at the doorway, glancing out at the narrow street, bathed in soft dawn light. The city was awakening slowly, with merchants setting up stalls and distant sounds of carts rolling over cobblestones. It was a world that belonged to others, yet somehow it also held a place for him. As he stepped out to begin his day, the first warm rays of sunlight brushed his face, and for a moment a promise of something more lingered like a gentle breeze. So if you're ready, settle in, breathe deep, and let the quiet world of Lucius unfold softly around you. The day had fully awakened now, with the Roman city's heartbeat rising steadily like a slow, rhythmic drum. Lucius moved through the narrow corridors of the Domus with practiced ease. His feet barely made a sound on the cool stone floors, a silent shadow beneath the bustle of his masters and their guests. First came the kitchen, alive with the scents of freshly ground grain and roasting meats. The flickering flame of the hearth threw warm light onto copper pots and wooden bowls, while other slaves busied themselves with chopping, kneading, and stirring. Lucius joined in, pulling dough from the basket and shaping it carefully into small loaves, the texture rough but promising. He worked quietly, careful not to draw attention, for in this world, invisibility was a kind of power, or at least protection. His hands, though calloused and worn, moved with a surprising gentleness. The heat of the oven was a constant presence, a steady reminder of the tireless demands of his life. Yet beneath these repetitive motions, Lucius's thoughts drifted. He wondered about the people he might have been if born free, or perhaps a merchant's son, wandering the forums or learning to read. But he pushed these dreams aside, not because they didn't matter, but because survival meant holding on to small hopes, not big fantasies. The morning chores extended beyond the kitchen. Lucius swept the atrium with a straw broom, chasing away the dust that gathered overnight like tiny memories. He refilled oil lamps, their flickering flames soon casting golden light across the marble columns. Every small act, no matter how menial, was a way to keep the household alive and running smoothly. In a brief pause, Lucius caught sight of a small garden tucked away behind the main building. It was a secret patch of green in the heart of stone and stone, where herbs grew in messy clusters, and a single fig tree spread its branches. He sometimes slipped away here during quiet moments, letting the soft rustling of leaves wash over him, a balm to the restless spirit. The other slaves, some older, some children, moved through their own rituals. There was warmth in their silent companionship, an unspoken understanding of shared burdens. They rarely spoke of freedom aloud. It was a fragile thread, best kept tucked away. Lucius heard the distant clatter of sandals on the cobblestones, the arrival of his master and his guests. Their voices carried through the air, sharp and commanding, punctuated by laughter and the occasional shout. These sounds reminded him of his place, the boundaries etched not only by law, but by fear and expectation. Yet even as the day pressed forward with relentless demands, Lucius's heart clung to a gentle secret, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, life held more than the chains he bore. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the open windows, Lucius took a steadying breath, readying himself for whatever the day would bring. Lucius knew the domus like the lines on his own hands. Every corridor, every creak in the floorboards, every faint scent clinging to the walls. The sprawling mansion was a maze of marble halls, cool-shadowed alcoves, and sunlit courtyards. To those outside, it was a palace of grandeur, but to Lucius, it was a cage made of stone and unspoken rules. Yet, within its massive walls were hidden corners few dared to visit, and even fewer understood. Places where the air whispered secrets and history rested like dust in the quiet. Some rooms were forbidden to him, guarded by more than just locks. They were territories of power, places where the masters held their private lives behind heavy curtains of silk and secrecy. The library was one such place, filled with shelves that rose like ancient trees. Packed with scrolls and leather-bound volumes, it smelled of parchment and ink, a scent so foreign it almost felt like magic to Lucius. He often stood just outside the heavy wooden door, listening to the faint rustling of pages, imagining what worlds the books contained. Stories of gods and heroes, of emperors and battles far away from the stone walls of his reality. Near the library, the triclinium, the grand dining hall, hummed with a different kind of energy. Here, the masters entertained guests beneath frescoed ceilings and beside flickering oil lamps. Silver platters gleamed with olives, figs, and roasted meats, and wine flowed in crystal goblets, the deep red catching the firelight like captured rubies. Lucius had served at these feasts more times than he cared to count, a shadow in the background, careful not to meet the eyes of the wealthy diners. Their gazes were cold, sometimes filled with disdain, and at other times simply ignoring his presence as if he were invisible. But Lucius learned early that invisibility had its own kind of power, to move unnoticed, to survive. Away from the pomp of the dining hall and the silence of the library lay the heart of the household's practical life, the kitchen and its adjoining storeroom. The kitchen was a hive of activity, heated by roaring hearths and filled with the aroma of bread baking, herbs drying, and meats curing. But the storeroom, Tucked away behind a heavy oak door was Lucius's secret refuge. It was a cool, shadowed place, cool even in the hot Roman sun, where sacks of grain, jars of honey, and barrels of wine rested in waiting. The scent of basil, garlic, and dried figs hung thick in the air, grounding and familiar. This little storeroom was where Lucius sometimes escaped the watchful eyes of overseers and masters. A place to breathe, to feel the cool stone under his fingertips, and to listen to the quiet rhythms of the house without the pressing weight of command or expectation. One rainy afternoon, while checking supplies, Lucius's fingers brushed against something unexpected beneath a pile of coarse cloth. It was a small leather pouch, old and cracked, as if it had been forgotten for years. His heart beat faster as he opened it carefully, revealing several scraps of parchment rolled tight and worn at the edges. His breath caught as he unfolded the first note, revealing hurried handwriting, faded ink, words both haunting and beautiful. The parchments were filled with verses, poems perhaps, or secret messages left to be found only by the right eyes. They spoke of longing, of lost love, of hopes held tightly in a world that often crushed such dreams. There were names, places, and dates, clues to lives lived behind the walls, hidden from the master's gaze. Lucius's fingers trembled as he read on, tracing the inked words in the dim light of the storeroom. For the first time, the domus felt less like a prison and more like a living thing, a place filled with unseen stories, whispered histories, and quiet rebellions. Each note was a window into a soul that had once dared to hope, to dream, to defy. That night, by the flickering flame of a single oil lamp, Lucius sat alone in his small room, the parchment spread before him. The words danced in the wavering light, filling the silence with voices from the past. He thought of the unknown writer. Who had they been? What had become of their dreams? And could his own life, too, one day slip from shadow into light? As he lay back on his cot, the rough fabric beneath him, Lucius felt a strange warmth. The heavy chains of his reality did not disappear, but in those hidden corners of the domus, in secret poems and stolen moments, a flicker of hope endured, a whisper of freedom, soft as a sigh. The night wrapped around the house like a velvet cloak, gentle and protective. And somewhere deep inside, Lucius dreamed quietly, holding on to the possibility of a dawn beyond these walls. Lucius's day began like many before it, the sun casting soft gold over the domus as the city of Rome stirred awake beyond the towering walls. Yet today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the morning light filtering through the olive trees, or the cool breeze carrying distant voices from the bustling streets outside. For a moment, his thoughts drifted beyond the stone confines of the household, beyond the narrow alleyways of the slave quarters, to the world outside, so vibrant and alive. The master's gates, heavy and imposing, usually stood closed like a barrier between two worlds. But this morning, they were wide open. The master's nephew was preparing to depart on horseback, his retinue bustling with hurried energy. Lucius was tasked with bringing fresh vegetables from the garden to the kitchen, and as he stepped through the main courtyard, he caught sight of the gates swinging open wide. For a fleeting moment, Lucius saw beyond the walls. The narrow cobblestone street stretched out, bathed in the gentle light of dawn. Market stalls lined the roads like colorful jewels, overflowing with ripe figs, pomegranates, and fragrant herbs. Vendors shouted their wares, their voices a lively chorus that blended with the neighing of horses and the chatter of townsfolk. Lucius's heart quickened as he glimpsed children playing by a fountain near the marketplace. Their laughter rang like music through the air, free and uninhibited. They ran in brightly colored tunics, chasing one another beneath the open sky, unburdened by chains or duties. To Lucius, their freedom seemed a distant dream, as unreachable as the farthest horizon. A sudden bark pierced the air as a stray dog dashed between the legs of a mule, causing the nephew's horse to rear in surprise. The gatekeeper's sharp voice commanded order, snapping Lucius back to his place. The gates began to close, the heavy iron thudding shut with finality, sealing off the lively world beyond. Yet the image lingered in Lucius's mind, a fragile spark of hope nestled deep within his chest. The world outside was vast and full of stories, and although he was bound by his servitude, he could feel the pull of that distant life, calling to him like a whispered promise. Returning to the kitchen, Lucius moved with renewed purpose. The aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering stew greeted him, a reminder of the small comforts within his reach. Yet even in the warmth of the dullness, he felt the walls closing in tighter, their marble cold and unyielding. Later, as he swept the atrium, the sun's rays catching the dust motes like tiny stars, Lucius allowed himself to imagine a different life. A life where he could walk the streets of Rome freely, where laughter was not a memory but a constant companion, and where his days were not measured by chores and commands, but by choice and chance. Though bound by chains both physical and invisible, Lucius's spirit held on to that glimpse beyond the walls. It was a secret he carried quietly, a seed of hope in a world built on control and constraint. As evening fell, the city's distant lights twinkled like scattered fireflies, and Lucius lay on his cot, eyes closed, heart filled with quiet longing. The day had been long, but in the depths of his soul, a gentle flame burned bright, a promise that beyond these walls, life waited, vast and mysterious, ready to unfold. The market was a world apart from the quiet, shadowed halls of the domus, a chaotic symphony of color, sound, and smell that filled the air with life. Though Lucius rarely ventured beyond his master's property, today his duties brought him closer to the market than ever before. Carrying a basket of fresh herbs and vegetables, he passed through the narrow alleys winding between stalls piled high with goods from across the empire. Vendors called out their wares in sharp, melodic voices. Fresh figs, sweet honey, crisp olives from Hispania. The scent of spices mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly baked bread and the salty tongue of dried fish. Lucius kept his gaze low, but his ears drank in the stories carried on the breeze. Whispers of distant lands, promises of rare treasures, and the hum of countless lives intersecting in the marketplace's vibrant dance. He noticed the merchants' faces, weathered and lined, eyes sharp with the knowledge of trade and survival. Nearby, a potter shaped clay with skilled hands, while children darted between carts, laughing and chasing one another in the warm sunlight. Lucius longed for such freedom, a longing sharpened by the contrast between his own life's constraints and the market's buzzing energy. At a quiet corner of the square, Lucius caught sight of a group of slaves from other households. Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange acknowledging shared hardships and secret strength. Among them was a young woman weaving baskets, her fingers nimble and sure. Though their worlds were separate, this moment of connection felt like a small rebellion against isolation. But the market held secrets too, dangers lurking beneath its lively surface. Lucius sensed the watchful eyes of city guards patrolling the edges, their presence a constant reminder of control and order. Any misstep, any hint of unrest, could bring swift punishment. As the sun climbed higher, casting shadows that shifted and danced among the stalls, Lucius completed his task and turned back toward the domus. The sights and sounds of the market lingered in his mind, a vivid tapestry of freedom and constraint, hope and caution. Back within the walls of the household, the air felt heavier, the marble colder. Yet, carrying the market's energy with him, Lucius found a quiet strength in the knowledge that life beyond the walls thrived, vibrant and relentless. That night, as he lay beneath the thin blanket in his quarters, Lucius dreamed of the market's endless possibilities, the colors, the laughter, the shared humanity. And though the chains of his reality remained, the buzzing secrets of the marketplace kindled a light within him, a gentle flame that whispered of worlds waiting to be explored. In the vast domus, where marble pillars stretched toward frescoed ceilings and the voices of masters echoed like thunder, the lives of slaves moved quietly, often unnoticed. Lucius had learned early that the walls, while strong and imposing, could never fully contain the delicate, secret threads that wove through the servants' lives, threads of friendship, trust, and sometimes forbidden hope. Among those threads was the bond between Lucius and Alea, a young slave girl with eyes as deep and soft as twilight skies. Their friendship had begun one rainy afternoon in the kitchen, where the heavy scent of herbs and simmering broth hung thick in the air. Lucius had found her humming a haunting melody, her voice so gentle it seemed to still the bustling kitchen for a moment. From that day on, their paths crossed more often. Alea was quick-witted and kind, with a quiet strength that balanced Lucius's cautious nature. They shared small smiles over stolen breadcrumbs and whispered conversations when the household slept. Their friendship blossomed in the hidden corners, behind stacked jars of olives, beneath the fig tree in the courtyard, and in the narrow passageways where the masters rarely ventured. But their connection was more than companionship. It was a fragile rebellion against the cold indifference of the world they lived in. For slaves, friendships across different households, or with those in service to the masters' families, were dangerous. Rumors spread quickly, and suspicion could turn to punishment with frightening speed. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the domus walls, casting long shadows through the olive branches, Alea confided a secret to Lucius beneath the whispering leaves. Her master planned to sell her to a distant estate beyond the sea, a place unknown, where language and customs would be foreign, and friends like Lucius would be left behind. The news settled over them like a cold fog. Lucius's chest tightened with a mix of fear and helplessness. Yet, in the soft glow of the fading light, they made a vow, a promise to hold on to their bond, no matter the miles or the masters that would try to keep them apart. Their friendship became a secret garden, a place of warmth, laughter, and courage, where they could shed the heavy cloak of servitude and simply be themselves. In stolen moments, they spoke of dreams too fragile to voice aloud in daylight, dreams of freedom, of a life where chains were not worn on wrists or hearts. Lucius often thought about the paradox of their friendship, born in shadow, yet shining brightly against the darkness that surrounded them. It was a quiet act of defiance, a gentle stand that gave meaning to the endless days of toil. One night, as a soft breeze stirred the curtains of his small room, Lucius lay awake thinking of Alea. He pictured her weaving baskets in distant lands, their friendship a delicate thread linking their worlds. Though fear lingered like a shadow at the edges, hope blossomed like a wildflower, fragile yet stubbornly alive. In a place where silence was survival and invisibility a shield, Forbidden's friendships like theirs were the soul's secret refuge. They whispered of possibility and held the promise of something more, something beyond the cold marble and harsh commands. And so, beneath the vast, star-speckled sky of ancient Rome, two souls found light in the darkness, a soft glow guiding them through each day, a gentle reminder that even in chains, the heart could soar. The morning light seeped softly through the wooden shutters of Lucius's quarters, stirring him awake with a quiet insistence. As he rose, the familiar ache in his limbs reminded him of the burdens he carried, both visible and invisible. The chains that bound him were not always made of iron. Some were woven from the harsh demands of duty, the weight of expectation, and the choices that life offered him in fragments too small to hold. Every day began the same way, with the sun rising over the sprawling city of Rome, casting long shadows across the stone streets and marble pillars. Lucius dressed quickly in his coarse tunic, the fabric rough against his skin, but comforting in its constancy. His hands, scarred from years of labor, moved with practiced care as he prepared to face another day in the household. Outside, the city pulsed with energy, merchants calling out their wares, horses trotting along cobblestone roads, and children's laughter echoing faintly from distant courtyards. Yet for Lucius, the domus remained both sanctuary and prison, its walls sheltering him from the chaotic world beyond, while hemming him in with endless tasks and silent rules. The weight of chains was felt most keenly in moments of quiet reflection. As he carried water from the cistern to the garden, Lucius thought about the choices he had or lacked. His days were filled with service, obedience, and endurance, but beneath the surface simmered a yearning for freedom, for a life not dictated by another's whim. Chains were not always physical. They were in the stolen glances of the master's family, in the hushed warnings exchanged among slaves, in the silent acceptance of a fate carved before birth. Yet, in those same moments, Lucius found strength. He learned to read the subtle language of resistance. A look held just a beat too long, a small act of kindness shared in secret, a fleeting dream whispered in the dark. Today, as the sun climbed higher, Lucius moved through his chores with quiet determination. Each step was measured, each action deliberate. The chains might bind his body, but his spirit found small freedoms, in the hidden garden where wild herbs grew, in the pages of a forgotten parchment, in the friendship that blossomed like a secret flower. The choices he made, to endure, to hope, to resist in silence, carried their own weight, heavier and more profound than any iron shackle. They shaped the man he was becoming, a man who understood that true freedom was not always found in escape, but in the courage to keep living, dreaming, and holding on to the light within. As the day faded into evening, Lucius stood beneath the open sky, the stars beginning to twinkle like distant fires. The weight of chains pressed against him still, but alongside it came a quiet resolve, a promise to himself that no matter the hardship, he would carry on, step by step, toward a future only he could imagine. The domus, grand and imposing, was a palace built to awe, marble columns rising like ancient trees, frescoes telling tales of gods and heroes, and polished floors that gleamed beneath the golden light filtering through stained glass. Above, the masters lived their lives like actors on a grand stage, voices ringing clear with laughter, command, and whispered intrigues. Yet beneath that polished veneer lay a different world, quieter, shadowed, but alive with its own pulse. Lucius had learned early to listen not just with his ears, but with his soul. The domus was more than stone and mortar. It was a living organism, breathing through the countless feet that moved within. The footsteps of the masters echoed loudly, their voices commanding rooms and hearts alike. But beneath those lofty sounds were the softer voices, the murmurs, the sighs, the whispered exchanges of the slaves who dwelled in the underworld of the house. He often paused in the dim corridors, where light fell in slivers and shadows gathered thick. There, he heard the hushed conversations of fellow slaves, voices low and careful, carrying stories of hardship, hope, and sometimes defiance. These were voices that did not seek to rise above, but to endure beneath, a chorus of resilience that wove through the domus like invisible threads. The voices were many. The old cook with his gruff warnings, tempered by moments of warmth. The nursemaid's lullabies soft as feathers in the quiet night. The steady hum of the blacksmith in the distant workshop. Each carried a history, a memory, a secret song of survival. Lucius treasured these sounds, for they reminded him he was not alone. On one particular evening, as the sun dipped behind the city's rooftops and shadows deepened, Lucius lingered near the grand staircase. Above, muffled voices floated down from the chambers of the master's family, words spoken in secrecy, plotting or reminiscing, laughter tinged with melancholy. These voices belonged to a world beyond Lucius's reach, yet their echoes stirred something deep within him. Yet beneath the polished floors, in the quiet spaces unseen by the masters, a slave's voices held a different kind of power. They sang songs from distant lands, passed down through generations, melodies that carried the scent of olive groves, the salt of the sea, and the warmth of sun-soaked fields. They shared stories of ancestors who had known freedom, of battles fought and lost, and of dreams that refused to be forgotten. One night, huddled by a flickering oil lamp, Lucius joined in the chorus. The group of slaves gathered in the small kitchen storeroom sang softly, their voices weaving a tapestry of sound that filled the cramped space with light and life. The songs were ancient, their meanings layered and deep, offering comfort and connection in the face of unyielding hardship. Lucius's heart swelled as he sang, feeling the invisible chains that bound his body loosen ever so slightly. In those moments, the domus transformed from a prison into a sanctuary of spirit, where voices beneath the marble floors created a world of their own, a world where hope could breathe and dreams could live. As night settled in and the stars blinked awake above the city, Lucius lay on his rough cot, the melodies still echoing in his ears. The voices beneath the marble floors wrapped around him like a gentle lullaby, guiding him softly into sleep, a sleep filled with whispers of freedom and the promise of tomorrow's dawn. The bathhouse of ancient Rome was a world all its own, a sanctuary of steam and stone, where the busy hum of the city faded away beneath vaulted ceilings and softly trickling fountains. For Lucius, the bathhouse was more than just a place to cleanse away the grime of endless toil. It was a refuge, a fleeting escape from the rigid chains of his daily life, a place where he could breathe in warmth and quiet for a moment. He arrived early each morning, carrying bundles of fresh herbs, rosemary, lavender, and mint gifts for the bath attendants who labored tirelessly to keep the water warm and the pools sparkling beneath flickering oil lamps. The air was thick with mist, swirling like gentle ghosts around the marble pillars, blurring the edges of reality and inviting a kind of dreamlike calm. Within this steamy world, Lucius listened closely to whispers, soft conversations between slaves, freedmen, and occasional visitors seeking respite. The voices were low, carrying tales of distant homelands, secret hopes, and forbidden desires. Here, beneath the heat and the scent of fragrant oils, hierarchies melted away briefly, replaced by shared humanity. Lucius learned the rhythms of the bathhouse, the splash of sandals on wet stone, the murmur of running water, the soft laughter of children playing near the shallow pools. The bath attendants moved with grace and quiet authority, their hands skilled in the art of cleansing and healing. To Lucius, their work seemed almost sacred, a balm for the weary bodies and souls trapped in the city's endless struggles. One afternoon, as he helped scrub the worn stone steps leading to the hottest pool, Lucius noticed a figure lingering by the water's edge. She was a young woman, a slave from another household, her eyes deep with both weariness and an unyielding spark of determination. Their gazes met briefly across the mist, an unspoken acknowledgment passing between them. Two souls sharing a moment of quiet, understanding in a world that seldom offered kindness. They exchanged no words, for in the bathhouse, silence often carried more meaning than speech. Yet in that brief connection, Lucius felt a surge of warmth, a gentle reassurance that even in captivity, there were moments of grace and solidarity. The bathhouse echoed with a mosaic of voices, the soft sighs of relief as muscles relaxed, whispered prayers uttered beneath breath, and the tender laughter of children chasing one another between pools. It was a place where sorrow and joy intertwined, where the weight of chains seemed to loosen beneath the comforting embrace of warm water and quiet companionship. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the arched windows, Lucius lingered a moment longer, breathing deeply the fragrant air. This sanctuary of steam and whispers, of warmth and gentle voices, reminded him that even in a life marked by servitude, moments of peace and connection were possible, moments that soothed the spirit and kindled the faintest flicker of hope. Returning to the domus, the heavy stone walls felt less oppressive, softened by the memory of the bathhouse's gentle refuge. Lucius carried with him the quiet strength of whispered stories and shared silences, a reminder that beneath the surface of hardship, the human heart still beat with resilience. That night, as he lay beneath his thin blanket, the echoes of the bathhouse whispered softly in his mind, lulling him toward sleep with promises of renewal, and the promise that tomorrow might hold another moment of grace. Beyond the towering walls of the domus and the bustling streets of Rome stretched wide fields, endless stretches of earth, sun-baked and heavy with the scent of fertile soil. Here, under the vast open sky, Lucius's day took on a different rhythm, marked by the sharp crack of hoes against earth, the steady scrape of sickles, and the relentless, unyielding sun beating down from above. Each morning, long before the city's clamor reached the ears of its masters, Lucius rose from his cot, the coarse fabric of his tunic already damp with sweat from the night's restlessness. Alongside a group of fellow slaves, he made his way to the fields, their feet stirring dust from the dry paths that wound through olive groves and wheat patches. The horizon was painted in soft hues of dawn, gentle pinks and golds spilling slowly into the awakening sky. The work was backbreaking. The sun climbed higher and hotter with every passing hour, burning the backs of those who toiled beneath it. Lucius gripped his hoe tightly, feeling the calluses rough against the worn wooden handle. He dug deep into the earth, turning soil that was both lifeblood and burden, planting seeds that would feed the city's masses. Sweat ran in salty rivulets down his face, soaking into the dirt under his fingernails. The fields were a world apart from the marble and silk of the domus. Here, the air was thick with the scent of dry earth, crushed herbs, and the faintest trace of wildflowers hiding among the grass. Silence ruled the land, broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead or the distant murmur of the Tiber, river flowing steadily toward the sea. Lucius found solace in this silence. It was a stark contrast to the constant noise and demands inside the household, a quiet that allowed his thoughts to wander freely. He imagined the stories told in whispered tones among the slaves, legends of escape routes through forests dense and dark, of secret havens beyond the reach of Roman law, and of freedom glowing like a distant star on the horizon. Though such dreams were dangerous to voice, they were impossible to silence. Each day in the fields was a testament to endurance, but also to hope. The soil beneath his hands was both prison and promise, holding within it the potential for growth and renewal. The bond between the workers was unspoken but strong. Simple acts, a shared flask of water, a whispered word of encouragement, knit them together in a fragile web of mutual support. Yet vigilance was ever present. The overseer's sharp eyes scanned the fields, ready to punish any sign of dissent or slowness. When the sun reached its zenith, Lucius and the others gathered beneath the scant shade of an ancient olive tree. They drank slowly from leather flasks, savoring the cool water as the breeze stirred the silver-green leaves overhead. In these moments, the vastness of the sky and the whisper of the wind offered a fleeting sense of freedom. Lucius closed his eyes and breathed deeply, the scent of earth and olive blossoms filling his lungs. Though his body was weary, his spirit felt a quiet strength blooming within. The sweat that coated his skin was a badge of survival, the silence around him a shield against despair. As the day waned, the workers trudged back to the domus, their shadows stretching long across the golden fields. The sky blazed with the deep reds and purples of sunset, casting a warm glow over the worn faces of those bound by servitude but unbroken in spirit. Lucius's muscles ached and his feet were sore, but his heart held fast to a simple truth. Even beneath the harshest sun, amidst sweat and silence, life endured, and with it the faint but persistent whisper of hope. The evening air inside the domus shimmered with an elegance that was both intoxicating and suffocating. Tonight was no ordinary night. It was the master's banquet, a lavish affair where silk and gold mingled with whispered schemes, and where the balance of power was as delicate as the finest glassware set upon the marble tables. As the last rays of sunlight slipped beneath Rome's horizon, the domus transformed. Servants scurried through its vast corridors, their footsteps light yet purposeful, carrying trays heavy with roasted boar glazed in honey, fish fresh from the Tiber, and exotic fruits whose names were foreign even to Lucius's ears. The scent of spiced wine, roasted chestnuts, and sweet figs filled the air, weaving an intoxicating tapestry that masked the tension simmering beneath. Lucius found himself moving among the guests, a shadow at the edges of the feast, balancing bowls of olives, jugs of wine, and platters of delicate pastries. His eyes flicked constantly to the faces of the masters, men and women whose smiles were as polished as the silverware, but whose eyes held sharp, calculating glints. The banquet was a performance. Senators draped in togas embroidered with purple thread debated loudly, their voices carrying the weight of the empire. Matrons whispered behind fans, their gossip slicing through the hum of conversation like knives. And amid it all, Lucius moved silently, an unseen thread in the grand tapestry of power. Between courses, subtle exchanges took place, glances laden with meaning, hushed words that spoke of alliances and betrayals, and the careful dance of masks worn not just on faces, but in hearts. Lucius had learned to read these signals, understanding that every gesture could shift the fragile balance of favor or fury. Yet even in this world of shadows and schemes, moments of humanity broke through. Lucius caught sight of the master's daughter, a young woman whose laughter was rare but genuine. She leaned toward a servant, their conversation hushed and warm, a fleeting spark of kindness in the otherwise cold atmosphere. It was a reminder that beneath the opulence and command, there were threads of connection that defied the rigid walls of status. As the banquet progressed, the slaves shared their own silent dialogue. Quick nods of encouragement, small smiles exchanged in the flicker of candlelight. Their survival depended on such subtlety, on the ability to blend into the background while remaining vigilant. The final course was served, honeyed cakes and rich cheeses, accompanied by sweet wine that left a warm glow in the chest. The guests reclined on their couches, voices lowering to murmurs as the evening wound down. Lucius helped clear the tables, the clatter of dishes a gentle percussion in the quieting house. Stepping outside into the cool night, Lucius breathed deeply. The stars glittered above like scattered jewels vast and distant. For a moment, the weight of his servitude seemed to lift, replaced by the fragile beauty of the night. The master's banquet was a world of masks and meals, a place where power was displayed and contested, where appearances hid truths, and where every smile could carry a secret. And through it all, Lucius moved silently, a witness and a participant in the endless dance of life within the domus. As he returned to his quarters, the echo of laughter and whispered promises lingered in the air, mingling with the soft rustle of night wind. The banquet was over, but its stories, its tensions, and its fragile hopes would continue to weave through the walls long after the guests had gone. Within the towering walls of the domus, beneath the marble floors and painted ceilings, the servants lived a world hidden from the eyes of their masters. It was a world defined not just by toil and obedience, but by a delicate, unspoken language, a secret code of glances, gestures, and subtle signs that wove through their daily lives like an invisible thread. Lucius had learned this language from the first days of his servitude. In a place where words could betray and silence was often safest, communication took on new forms. A slight tilt of the head, a careful brush of fingers against fabric, or the barely perceptible meeting of eyes could carry messages far louder than speech. This language was a lifeline, a shield, and sometimes a quiet rebellion against the rigid chains of their existence. In the bustling kitchen, where the clatter of pots and sizzling of fires filled the air, Lucius watched the dance of coded signals. The cook might tap a spoon against a pot in a specific rhythm, a warning of approaching overseers or a call to hasten a task. A basket left intentionally askew in a hallway could mean danger ahead or meeting tonight. Even the placement of a simple piece of bread on a windowsill held meaning, a gift, a plea, or a secret invitation. This secret language was not only about warnings. It was a vessel for stories and shared humanity. During brief stolen moments in the courtyard, Lucius and Alea would speak in whispers softened by the afternoon breeze, but their true communication thrived in the unspoken. A gentle touch on the arm, a glance filled with trust and affection, a smile exchanged across crowded spaces. Their friendship, forged in the shadows of servitude, blossomed through this intricate dance of silent understanding. The servants used this language to sustain hope amid hardship. When exhaustion threatened to swallow their spirits, a light squeeze of a shoulder or a fleeting look of encouragement became a balm. Small, thoughtful gestures. A piece of fruit left where a friend would find it, a freshly washed cloak folded neatly on a cot, spoke of care and solidarity far louder than words could. Lucius often marveled at the resilience and creativity woven into this silent lexicon. It was a testament to the human spirit's refusal to be silenced, a quiet anthem of hope sung beneath the clamor of chains and commands. Even when danger loomed, when masters grew suspicious or punishments threatened, the language adapted, becoming ever more subtle, a delicate game of shadows and whispers that bound the servants together. Through it all, the code offered connection, protection, and the courage to dream. As twilight deepened and the household settled into a restless hush, Lucius lay on his cot reflecting on the power of these unspoken words. In a world ruled by control and constraint, the secret language of servants was a living thread of freedom, a way to connect, to survive, and to envision a future beyond the walls. With the soft glow of an oil lamp flickering nearby, Lucius closed his eyes, comforted by the knowledge that even in silence, he was never truly alone. As the sun sank slowly beneath the sprawling rooftops of Rome, a quiet hush began to settle over the domus. The day's harsh light softened into a gentle twilight, casting long shadows that stretched across marble floors and ancient stone walls. Inside, the voices of the masters grew faint as they retreated to their richly adorned chambers, their laughter and commands replaced by the subtle creaks and sighs of the household, settling into night. For Lucius and the other slaves, sunset was a moment of delicate reprieve, a time when the relentless demands of the day gave way to softer rhythms and whispered stories. The servants' quarters, tucked away in the quieter corners of the domus, transformed into a sacred space where flickering oil lamps cast dancing shadows and warmed the cold stone with pools of golden light. Here, around small fires or under the protective embrace of olive trees in the courtyard, stories flowed like gentle rivers, carrying the weight of history and the lightness of hope. These tales were more than mere words. They were lifelines, bridges between past and future, between suffering and resilience. Lucius listened intently as an elder slave began to speak, his voice low and steady, weaving legends of heroes and gods from distant lands. His stories told of mighty warriors who fought for freedom, of spirits who walked unseen among mortals, and of places where chains were unknown and dreams grew wild. Each word was steeped in longing, painted with laughter and sorrow, echoing the complex tapestry of their shared existence. The storytelling was an art passed down through generations, a precious gift that offered comfort and connection. As the night deepened, the tales grew richer, of cunning tricksters who outwitted tyrants, of love that defied boundaries, and of the enduring power of the human spirit to endure and dream. In these moments, the burden of servitude seemed to lighten. The chains that bound their bodies loosened in the realm of imagination, where freedom blossomed like a fragile flower in spring. Around the flickering flames, friendships deepened, secrets were shared, and a quiet sense of community blossomed beneath the vast Roman sky. Lucius cherished these evenings. They were a balm to his weary soul, a space where hope could take root amid the shadows. The stories whispered promises of another day, another chance to survive, to resist, and perhaps, one day, to break free. As the stars began to pepper the night sky, and the cool breeze carried the scent of jasmine and olive blossoms through open windows, the storytelling slowly gave way to gentle sighs and the soft rustle of blankets. Sleep crept in like a soothing tide, washing over the household and carrying dreams along its quiet waves. In the stillness of night, beneath the canopy of countless stars, Lucius closed his eyes, comforted by the knowledge that though the chains of servitude held firm, the stories of freedom and resilience lived on, eternal and unbroken. Each year, as winter's chill began to fade and the days grew just a little longer, the city of Rome prepared to celebrate Saturnalia, the festival of Saturn. This festival was unlike any other in the Roman calendar, for during its days, the strict hierarchies that bound the city loosened, and even slaves like Lucius tasted a rare, sweet freedom. For a few precious days, roles were reversed. Laughter filled the streets, and the heavy chains of servitude felt just a little lighter. The streets buzzed with anticipation in the days leading up to Saturnalia. Banners in rich purples, vibrant greens, and glowing golds hung from every balcony and archway, swaying gently in the crisp breeze. Garlands woven from ivy and pine needles were draped over doorways, their earthy scent mingling with the aroma of roasting meats and spiced wine drifting from open windows and market stalls. Markets overflowed with colorful fruits, nuts, and sweets, their vivid colors like jewels against the worn stone streets. Street performers juggled, sang, and danced, drawing crowds of cheering children and adults alike. The laughter of the city was bright and unrestrained, a sharp contrast to the usual order and discipline that ruled daily life. Within the domus, the atmosphere shifted. The masters, who so often carried stern faces and commanding voices, softened with the spirit of the festival. They decked their homes in garlands and lit countless oil lamps, casting warm, flickering light that danced upon frescoed walls and marble floors. For once, the air was filled with the promise of joy rather than duty. Saturnalia was a time when the normal rules could be bent, even broken. Masters served their slaves, a symbolic gesture that sent ripples of hope through the household. Slaves wore wreaths of greenery and colorful tunics, faces bright with laughter and the spark of liberty. Masks and costumes hid identities, allowing playful reversals of fortune, a temporary kingdom of shadows where the powerless could feel powerful. Lucius found himself swept up in the celebration. He danced beneath lantern light in the courtyard alongside fellow slaves, their movements a mixture of joy, defiance, and fleeting abandon. The chains that bound his wrists and heart seemed to dissolve, replaced by the shared warmth of community and the electric thrill of freedom, even if only for a moment. Songs filled the night air, ancient hymns to Saturn, joyful carols, and lively tunes that invited clapping and merriment. The stories told during these nights spoke of renewal, hope, and the promise of a world where chains might one day fall away forever. Yet the festival's end was always bittersweet. As the final night waned and the city began to shed its festive decorations, reality crept back in. The banners came down, the garlands wilted, and the oil lamps were extinguished. The domus grew quiet once more. The masters resumed their roles of command, and the slaves returned to their routines of silence and labor. But the memory of Saturnalia endured in Lucius's heart like a flickering candle in the dark. Those brief days of joy and reversed fortunes were a beacon, a reminder that even under the harshest rule, the human spirit could rise and touch the sweetness of freedom. He carried that hope through the long months that followed, letting it kindle a quiet fire inside. A promise that one day, perhaps, those fleeting freedoms might stretch into forever. In the heart of the sprawling domus, amidst the endless toil and quiet endurance of slaves, there was a rare and precious light, the innocence of a child. Among the heavy burdens and whispered secrets, children moved like fragile sparks of hope, their laughter and wonder untouched by the full weight of chains that bound the adults around them. Lucius often found himself watching the children in the servants' quarters, their small forms darting between shadows and sunlit patches of courtyard. Their laughter was a soft melody, like the gentle ringing of bells on a quiet morning, a sound both unexpected and deeply comforting. Among these children, one captured Lucius's heart most, a boy named Marcus, whose bright, curious eyes seemed to hold the promise of a world not yet broken by cruelty or fear. Marcus was no more than 7 years old, but his spirit was vast. He carried with him the boundless curiosity of youth and the quiet resilience born from knowing hardship too early. He moved with a lightness that seemed almost magical, chasing butterflies in the garden with wild abandon, exploring every nook and cranny of the domus with wide-eyed wonder. For Marcus, the walls and chains that hemmed in the adults were invisible barriers, mysteries waiting to be understood. Lucius found himself drawn to the boy's innocence, like a moth to light. In the brief moments they shared, he became a gentle guide, teaching Marcus what little he could. He showed the boy how to read the secret language of glances and signs among the slaves, whispered explanations of the herbs growing wild in the courtyard's neglected garden, and shared stories passed down through generations, tales of heroes and gods, of battles won and freedom dreamed. Marcus's presence softened the edges of Lucius's harsh world. The child's laughter was a balm, a fleeting joy that lifted the heavy air and reminded all who heard it that life was not solely defined by chains and servitude. Even in the darkest corners, the boy's light found a way to shine. In the quiet evenings, as the stars began to twinkle over Rome's ancient rooftops, Lucius would sit with Marcus beneath the broad olive tree, its silver-green leaves whispering softly in the breeze. There, beneath the vast night sky, he spun tales of distant lands, brave warriors, and the enduring hope of freedom. Marcus's eyes grew wide with wonder, reflecting the flickering oil lamp's glow, and for a few precious moments, the domus became less a prison and more a place where dreams could root and grow. Yet Lucius knew that innocence was fragile. The harsh realities of their lives awaited the boy just beyond the walls, ready to press upon his spirit with cruel hands. But for now, in these stolen moments, Marcus's laughter was a defiant song, a testament to the resilience of the human heart. Though the future remained uncertain and shadowed, the innocence of a child like Marcus was a beacon, a light that refused to be extinguished even in the darkest nights. It was a quiet promise that no matter how heavy the chains, hope endured, whispered softly in the laughter of a child. In the quiet corners of the domus, away from the clamor of daily labor and the sharp commands of masters, there existed a refuge, a place where pain was soothed and hope rekindled. This sanctuary belonged to the medicus, the healer whose gentle hands and ancient knowledge offered solace amid the relentless hardships of servitude. Lucius had watched the medicus from a distance many times, intrigued by the way they moved with quiet confidence and compassion. The medicus was neither a master nor a servant, but a figure who bridged worlds, bearing the sacred knowledge of herbs, poultices, and whispered incantations. Their skill was a blend of science and faith, of careful observation and centuries-old traditions passed down through generations. The medicus's small chamber was filled with the scents of drying herbs, rosemary, lavender, thyme, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly crushed roots and simmering concoctions. Bottles and jars of all sizes lined the shelves, their contents mysterious and potent. The air was thick with the promise of healing, a stark contrast to the weight of chains that bound so many in the household. When illness or injury struck the slaves, the medicus became a beacon of hope. Lucius recalled vividly the day a young child had fallen from a tree, the sharp crack of broken bones silencing the usual laughter. The medicus had arrived swiftly, their hands steady and sure as they wrapped the shattered limb in cloth soaked with soothing salves. The scent of lavender and myrrh filled the room, calming the child's cries and the fearful whispers of those gathered. Lucius himself had once been the recipient of the medicus's care. A fever, fierce and unrelenting, had left him weak and trembling. He lay on a straw mat in the corner of the chamber, the coarse fabric rough against his clammy skin. The medicus worked quietly, mixing bitter herbs and murmuring soft prayers. Night stretched long, but as dawn broke, relief blossomed within Lucius's aching body, and with it, a renewed strength that carried him back to his duties. The healer's role extended beyond physical cures. They offered compassion in a world often devoid of kindness, a reminder that even the lowest slaves were deserving of dignity and care. The medicus listened to stories of pain and hope, offering gentle words alongside remedies, and in their presence, suffering felt lighter. Lucius seized every opportunity to learn from the medicus, cherishing lessons on the names of plants, the preparation of poultices, and the simple arts of healing. These moments were treasures, small acts of empowerment amid a life of hardship. Even as the sun set over Rome, bathing the domus in a warm, fading glow, Lucius carried the image of the medicus's hands, steady, kind, and skilled, as a symbol of resilience. The healer was more than a mender of wounds. They were a bearer of hope, a quiet light that shone in the darkest shadows, reminding all who suffered that compassion could bloom even in the harshest soil. In the stillness of night, Lucius would sometimes close his eyes and imagine those healing hands reaching out, touching not just bodies but hearts, binding the broken pieces of a life fractured by chains. Far beyond the marble palaces of Rome and the bustling streets crowded with merchants, senators, and common folk, there stood a place both terrifying and magnificent, the gladiators' arena. The Colosseum loomed large in the heart of the city, an enormous amphitheater carved from stone and ambition, a brutal theater where the lives of men hung on the edge of a blade. For Lucius, and for countless slaves like him, the arena was a world apart, distant yet ever present, its echoes reverberating through the city's narrow alleys and crowded markets, a constant reminder of both power and peril. Though he had never stepped inside its massive walls, Lucius had heard the stories countless times, whispered in the dark corners of the servants' quarters. Tales of gladiators, men chained, trained, and thrust into combat, who fought not just for life, but for fleeting moments of glory. These men were slaves and celebrities, prisoners and warriors, bound by iron, but celebrated by thousands. Their battles were dances of death, where every strike, every parry, every breath could be the difference between survival and oblivion. The elderly slaves spoke of the arena with reverence and fear. They described the thunderous roar of the crowd, a living beast that rose and fell with the clash of steel. They spoke of the glitter of polished armor, catching the unforgiving sunlight. The spray of blood splattered across the sun-baked sand, and the fierce determination burning in the eyes of those who fought. Each tale was vivid, a tapestry of courage, pain, desperation, and hope woven with the voices of those who had witnessed the spectacle or lived its horrors. Lucius pictured those gladiators as towering figures, muscles taut with tension, faces set in grim determination, bodies marked by scars and bruises. In his mind, he saw their every movement. The flash of a gladius as it struck true, the sweep of a shield blocking a lethal blow, the dance-like steps of men fighting not just for life, but for a chance to reclaim their souls from captivity. The arena was more than a battlefield. It was a crucible of human spirit, where weakness was punished and courage was forged in blood. Yet beyond the spectacle and brutality, the arena held a strange duality. The men who fought were slaves themselves, victims of fate's cruel hand. Many had been sold into combat, their lives bartered for the entertainment of Rome's elite. Their bodies bore the scars of countless battles, their souls heavy with the weight of forced violence. And yet, within the sands of the arena, these warriors found a rare, flickering power, a momentary glimpse of freedom, respect, and even hope. Lucius felt a kinship with these gladiators. Their struggle echoed his own silent battle, to endure, to resist, to preserve dignity under the crushing weight of chains. The arena's roar was a distant echo of the spirit's unyielding cry for freedom. It reminded him that even in the darkest prisons, the human soul could blaze brightly. The sounds of the arena, the clash of weapons, the roar of the crowd, the cries of combatants, reverberated far beyond its walls, reaching into Rome's narrow streets and shadowed alleys. These echoes became a living anthem of defiance and courage, a reminder that power could be challenged, and that even the enslaved held a spark of rebellion. At night, when the city's bustle faded and stars scattered across the velvet sky, Lucius lay on his hard cot, the memory of the arena's roar pulsing through his veins. The stories of gladiators, their valor, their pain, their fleeting triumphs, filled his dreams with visions of strength and hope. In the stillness of his small room, beneath the vast Roman heavens, he imagined a day when his own voice would rise, fierce, unbroken, and free. And so, the echoes from the gladiators' arena lived on, a testament to the enduring human spirit, a whispered promise that chains could one day be broken, and that courage, no matter how battered, would always find a way to roar. In the quiet, humble corner of the Domus, where Lucius laid his head to rest each night, a world of silent voices whispered through the fragile pages of forgotten letters. These were letters never sent, messages carefully written, folded and hidden away, fragile as glass and heavy with the weight of hope, sorrow, and yearning. Among the scattered relics of the household, beneath dusty cloths and behind worn bricks, Lucius had stumbled upon these delicate scraps of parchment, which told stories that no one dared to speak aloud. Each letter was a tender thread connecting the past to the present, a testament to lives shaped by chains, yet filled with dreams unbroken by captivity. They were the voices of slaves and servants who had walked these very halls before him, whose hands had trembled as they penned words meant only for the eyes of absent loved ones, or perhaps only for themselves. These pages bore witness to the quiet rebellion of the human spirit, a refusal to be silenced, a desperate hope that somehow, somewhere, freedom might exist. Many letters were love letters, their ink stained with tears and longing. They spoke of families torn apart by fate and cruelty, of mothers yearning for children, lost to distant masters, and of friends separated by walls and seas. The words breathed with longing, a soft ache that reached across time and space. Others contained secret plans and warnings-coded messages hidden between the lines, speaking of midnight meetings under the olive trees, of routes through shadowed forests, and of dreams too fragile to risk speaking aloud. Lucius often traced the faded letters with calloused fingers, marveling at the delicate handwriting, sometimes shaky, sometimes bold, and the small drawings in the margins. A soaring bird breaking free from invisible chains, a broken shackle lying abandoned, an olive branch symbolizing peace and hope. These symbols spoke louder than words, whispering secrets of courage and faith. One letter, written in hurried script, told the heartbreaking story of a mother separated from her child, her words a plea for safety and reunion, a prayer carried on invisible wings across distance and despair. Another recounted a man's dream of escaping beyond the seas to a land where slavery was unknown and freedom was breathed like air. Each letter was a fragile beacon, a flickering flame that refused to be extinguished by the darkness surrounding them. Inspired by these silent voices, Lucius took to writing his own letters, though he knew they might never leave the confines of the domus or be read by anyone but himself. Writing became a sacred ritual, a way to claim a voice in a world determined to render him voiceless. His words were prayers whispered into the night, promises made to his own heart, and quiet affirmations of resilience, hope, and determination. In his letters, Lucius poured dreams of freedom, of reuniting with lost loved ones, and of a life unshackled by chains. Writing gave him a semblance of power and control in an existence otherwise dictated by others. It was a gentle rebellion, a flame burning steadily in the cold darkness of captivity. Though these letters might never be sent or read, they were never truly lost. They lived in the silent corners of the domus, carried in the hearts of those who dared to hope and dream. They stood as enduring proof of the human spirit's capacity to soar, even when bound by the heaviest chains. As the night deepened and the city of Rome succumbed to a fragile quiet, Lucius carefully folded his letters and slipped them beneath his pillow. Surrounded by the gentle breathing of sleeping slaves, he dreamed of the day when these words might take flight, when whispers penned in shadows could become the songs of freedom that echo across the ages. As dusk gently settled over the ancient city of Rome, a transformation took place in its winding streets and narrow alleys. The harsh, unforgiving daylight softened into a tender twilight, and lanterns were lit small, flickering flames suspended like stars amidst the shadows. To most, they were merely sources of light, guiding weary feet home through the labyrinth of stone. But to Lucius and the slaves who inhabited the hidden corners of the city, these lanterns were so much more. They were fragile beacons of hope, gentle flames that defied the dark weight of servitude and despair. Within the cramped quarters of the slaves, lanterns were cherished with a care that bordered on reverence. These small vessels of light were tended carefully, their wicks trimmed and oil replenished in secret, passed down through generations as precious heirlooms of comfort and resistance. The soft glow they cast revealed faces worn by endless labor, but softened by quiet dreams and whispered prayers. It was under this warm, trembling light that children played, their laughter echoing like tiny sparks igniting the cool night air. Their innocence and joy were small miracles, reminders of life's delicate persistence. The lanterns also carried secret meanings, woven into the flickering language of their flames. Among slaves, the dance of light and shadow became a silent code steady flames, spoke of safety and welcome, while flickering or wavering flames warned of danger or betrayal. In this hidden network, subtle signals were passed like precious gifts warnings to avoid a suspicious overseer, invitations to gather in secret, or words of encouragement whispered through light. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky faded to a deep indigo, Lucius found himself among a group of slaves moving silently through the labyrinthine alleys, each carrying a lantern. Their footsteps were soft and measured, their faces calm but resolute. This procession was more than a movement through the city. It was a ritual, a gentle rebellion, a collective act of remembrance and resistance. The lantern's glow cut through the darkness like stars fallen to earth, lighting a path toward freedom and dignity. As they walked, Lucius felt an overwhelming connection to those who had come before him, ancestors who had carried these very lanterns through darker nights and harsher times, and to those who would follow. The flames, though small and vulnerable, held a strength that transcended their fragile forms. They were promises, not just of survival, but of hope, courage, and the unyielding desire for a better life. The city around them seemed to hold its breath, the usual noise soft to a whisper, as if even the stones themselves were listening to the silent song of the lanterns. The procession wound its way through the heart of Rome, each light a pulse in a larger rhythm, a reminder that even when shadows lengthen and darkness threatens to engulf, light remains. As the night deepened and the stars emerged overhead, Lucius stood beneath the vast canopy of the heavens, his lantern's glow mingling with the distant shimmer of constellations. Closing his eyes, he let the warmth of the light fill his heart, a balm against the cold weight of chains and the heaviness of uncertainty. In that moment, the lanterns were not just lights. They were promises, whispers from the past, and vows to the future. They spoke of resilience in the face of despair, of quiet courage in the darkest times. They were the steady pulse of humanity, beating against the cold silence of oppression. Lucius knew that no matter how fierce the night, the flame of hope would never be extinguished. It would guide the way through the shadows, toward freedom, toward home. And so, with the lantern's gentle glow lighting his path, Lucius stepped forward into the night, carrying the light of countless souls before him, a living testament to the enduring power of hope. In the heart of the domus, within a small, sun-dappled courtyard, stood an ancient olive tree. Its twisted, gnarled trunk bore the marks of countless seasons, bark cracked and weathered, branches reaching skyward like the arms of a silent guardian. For Lucius and the other slaves who toiled beneath the watchful eyes of masters, the olive tree was more than mere flora. It was a living symbol of quiet strength, resilience, and hope amidst hardship. Each day, as the sun cast long shadows over the courtyard, Lucius sought refuge beneath the tree's cool, rustling leaves. The rough texture of its bark pressed into his back, grounding him to the earth, while the soft murmur of the leaves dancing in the breeze became a soothing lullaby for his weary spirit. Here, time seemed to slow, and the heavy burdens of servitude lifted, if only for a precious moment. The olive tree had witnessed centuries of history, emperors and slaves, celebrations and sorrow, triumphs and tragedies, all unfolding beneath its steadfast branches. It bore silent witness to whispered prayers, stolen conversations, and quiet acts of rebellion. It sheltered the dreams of those who dared to hope, its roots entwined with the stories of generations who had called this place home. Lucius often shared this sacred space with fellow slaves. Together, They exchanged stories beneath the tree's protective canopy, tales of distant lands, remembered ancestors, and dreams of freedom. The tree seemed to listen, its leaves whispering back encouragement in the language of the wind. It was a place of solace, connection, and strength. On evenings when the air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and olive blossoms, Lucius would lean his head against the tree's sturdy trunk, closing his eyes to the world. The quiet rustle of leaves mingled with the soft chorus of night insects, creating a symphony of calm that washed over him like a gentle tide. In those moments, the olive tree became a sanctuary, a silent companion offering steadfast support amid the uncertainty of life as a slave. The tree's resilience inspired Lucius. It endured scorching summers and bitter winters, storms that bent its branches but never broke them. Its roots delved deep into the earth, drawing nourishment from hidden places, just as Lucius sought strength from the deepest parts of his soul. The olive tree stood as a testament to endurance, a living metaphor for the human spirit's capacity to survive and flourish despite adversity. As night fell and stars emerged to blanket the sky, the silhouette of the olive tree stretched tall and proud against the dark canvas. It stood guard over the sleeping domus, a steadfast sentinel amid the shadows. Lucius felt a profound peace in its presence, drawing courage from its silent endurance and dreaming of a day when he, too, might stand tall and free. In the embrace of the ancient tree's shade, surrounded by the soft sounds of the night, Lucius found a quiet strength blossoming within, a strength born of hope, resilience, and the unyielding desire for freedom. In the quiet depths of the domus, far from the marble halls and the bustling streets of Rome, there existed a sanctuary, warmed not by gold nor grandeur, but by fire the hearth. It was here, in this humble corner, that the weary souls of the slaves found a refuge from the endless demands of servitude. The hearth's flickering flames sang a silent song, a melody woven not of notes or words, but of crackling embers, shifting shadows, and the gentle rhythm of breathing hearts. As the day's labor faded into memory and the masters retreated to their ornate chambers, the slaves gathered around the hearth like moths drawn to its glow. The firelight painted their faces with a soft, golden hue, revealing eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet still shimmering with quiet determination. In this circle of warmth, voices lowered to whispers, stories flowed like gentle streams, and laughter, though subdued, broke through the silence, carrying the lightness of fleeting joy. Lucius often found himself drawn to the hearth, seeking solace in its comforting embrace. The steady crackle of burning wood became a rhythm that steadied his restless mind, a heartbeat in the stillness that invited calm and reflection. It was here, beneath the canopy of dancing flames and curling smoke, that he felt connected, not just to those sitting beside him, but to the countless generations who had found strength and comfort in the fire's glow before him. The hearth was more than a source of warmth. It was a repository of memories. It held the echoes of shared meals eaten hurriedly and in secret, of whispered prayers offered in the dark, and of celebrations, small and brief moments when hope flickered like the flames themselves. Here, stories of distant lands and imagined freedoms were told and retold, each word kindling the fire of resilience within weary hearts. The fire's glow wove a tapestry of light and shadow that transformed the cold stone walls into a sanctuary of comfort and connection. Each flicker cast new shapes, inviting dreams to dance alongside the flames. Lucius would watch the shadows play, letting the silent music of the hearth soothe his spirit, easing the burdens of the day and sparking the faintest glimmer of hope. In the hush of the night, as the fire burned low and the air grew cooler, the circle around the hearth would grow quieter. Voices softened into lullabies, and a gentle hum of breathing filled the space. Lucius felt the weight of exhaustion slip away, replaced by a gentle peace that wrapped around him like a warm cloak. The hearth's silent music was a promise, a testament that even in the darkest hours, light could be found, that even in silence, a song existed, and that even in the harshest bondage, a flicker of freedom endured, waiting to be nurtured until it could blaze bright. As the embers glowed softly and the first hints of dawn crept over Rome's rooftops, Lucius closed his eyes, letting the warmth and quiet carry him into dreams. The hearth's song lingered in his heart, a soothing lullaby guiding him toward rest and renewal, reminding him that no matter how dark the night, the light would always return. Within the ancient domus, where marble pillars rose toward frescoed ceilings and stone floors, echoed with the footsteps of masters and slaves alike, there existed a secret world beyond the visible. It was a world whispered into being by the very walls themselves, walls that had borne silent witness to centuries of human lives, their joys, their sorrows, their struggles and hopes, etched invisibly into the cold stone. To Lucius, these whispering walls were more than mere architecture. They were silent companions, guardians of memory and keepers of untold stories. Each night, when the domus sank into a hush broken only by the soft breathing of its inhabitants, Lucius would find a quiet corner and press his ear against the rough stone. The chill of the wall seeped into his skin, grounding him, connecting him to the vast tapestry of lives that had passed through these halls before him. In the faintest creaks and sighs, in the settling of centuries-old mortar, he imagined the voices of the past whispers of children's laughter echoing down the corridors, the stern commands of overseers cutting through the air like sharp blades, the quiet prayers of weary slaves seeking strength and solace. Lucius listened to these echoes, piecing together the fragments of history carried on the breath of the domus. The walls seemed to tell stories of resilience, how generations had endured hardship and humiliation, yet clung stubbornly to hope. They spoke of moments of tenderness hidden beneath the harshness, a shared meal passed in secret, a comforting touch in the dead of night, a whispered promise of a better tomorrow. These were stories not carved in stone, but etched deep into the spirit of the place. The whispering walls also carried warnings and secret cautions, passed from one to another through subtle sounds and silences, guiding those who listened towards safety or away from danger. To the slaves, the domus was a living entity, its stones alive with the memories and voices of countless souls bound by fate, but unbroken in spirit. In the darkness before dawn, when the world held its breath, and the first light was but a pale promise on the horizon, the whispers softened into a gentle hum, a lullaby, sung by the domus itself, wrapping Lucius and his companions in a cocoon of remembrance and hope. The walls, though silent in the daylight, became storytellers in the night, reminding those who would listen that they were part of an unending chain of resilience and survival. Lucius found comfort in this connection to the past. It made him feel less alone, less trapped by the weight of his chains. The domus was not just a prison of stone and command. It was a repository of stories, a testament to the enduring strength of those who had come before. And in the quiet murmur of the whispering walls, Lucius heard the promise that memory itself was a kind of freedom, a light that could never be extinguished. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through narrow windows, painting soft patterns on the floor. The whispers faded, but their presence lingered in Lucius's heart. The past lived on, carried gently in the walls that had seen it all, waiting to be heard by those willing to listen. Beyond the towering walls of the domus, and away from the ceaseless clamor of Roman life, there existed a secret place known only to a few, a hidden garden. This sanctuary was overgrown yet alive, a lush refuge where wildflowers and fragrant herbs flourished amid tangled vines and ancient trees. To most, it was merely a forgotten corner of the household, but to Lucius and a small circle of trusted companions, it was a sacred space, a fragile oasis of peace and possibility in a world shaped by chains and commands. The garden was a patchwork of colors and scents, where jasmine's sweet fragrance mingled with the sharp aroma of rosemary, and the delicate blossoms of roses nodded gently beneath the caress of the breeze. Bees hummed lazily among the petals, and birds flitted from branch to branch, their songs a soft symphony that filled the quiet air with hope. Here, beneath a canopy of leaves dappled with sunlight, time seemed to slow, inviting weary bodies and minds to rest and renew. Lucius treasured these stolen moments in the garden. His footsteps were muffled by moss and fallen petals as he wandered along winding paths hidden beneath towering olive trees and gnarled fig branches. The soil, soft and rich beneath his fingers, seemed to hold the promise of new life, a reminder that even in hardship, growth was possible. In the secret corners of this sanctuary, Lucius and his fellow slaves gathered to share whispered stories and quiet laughter, their voices mingling with the rustling leaves. They planned in hushed tones, dreaming of freedom and futures far beyond the reach of their masters. The garden was a place where hope took root, silent but persistent. Together, they planted small tokens of resilience, sprigs of herbs carried from distant lands, tiny flowers nurtured from seeds smuggled in pockets, and saplings carefully tended under the watchful eyes of the group. Each plant was more than greenery. It was a symbol of defiance, a fragile promise that life would bloom despite the weight of captivity. The garden itself seemed to respond to their care, flourishing with a quiet vibrancy that belied its hidden nature. Leaves shimmered with dew, blossoms opened to the sun's gentle touch, and the earth whispered back in a language of growth and renewal. This secret refuge nourished not only the body, but the soul, weaving a tapestry of life and light amid shadows of despair. As the sun sank low and the sky was painted in soft hues of gold and rose, the garden glowed with a gentle, almost magical light. Lanterns hung from branches, casting warm pools of illumination that mingled with fireflies' soft dance. It was a beacon in the darkness, a sacred space where spirits found strength and hearts dared to dream. For Lucius, the hidden garden was proof that even in the harshest places, life and hope could root deeply and bloom beautifully. It was a reminder that no matter how heavy the chains, nature's resilience mirrored the unbreakable spirit within him and those who shared the secret sanctuary. Beneath the stars, surrounded by the scents and sounds of the garden, Lucius felt a quiet joy. Here, in this stolen haven, freedom was not just a distant dream, but a living, breathing promise, one he would carry with him through every shadowed night and into the dawn of a new day. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and rosemary as Lucius stepped slowly through the hidden garden one last time. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the tangled vines and blooming flowers he had tended so carefully. This garden, his sanctuary, his secret, was about to be left behind, swallowed once again by the relentless demands of the domus and the ever-shifting tides of fate. Change was coming. Rumors whispered through the halls of the arrival of new masters, new orders, and new uncertainties. The steady rhythm of life within the domus was shifting, and with it, the fragile threads of comfort and hope that Lucius and his fellow slaves clung to would be tested. It was a quiet farewell to a chapter of endurance and secret joy, a moment heavy with both sorrow and resolve. Lucius ran his fingers gently over the olive branches, the soft petals of wildflowers, and the rough leaves of herbs that had offered solace through countless days and nights. Each plant, each bloom, was a testament to survival, a quiet rebellion blooming defiantly against the harshness of the world beyond the garden's walls. Around him, the other slaves moved with the same quiet purpose. Soft goodbyes were spoken in whispered tones. Shared smiles carried the weight of unspoken memories, and hands clasped firmly in solidarity, an unbroken chain of resilience. They understood that this farewell was not an end, but a transformation, a passage from one struggle to another, carrying with it the flickering flame of hope. Lucius gathered a handful of seeds, small and unassuming, but alive with the promise of new beginnings. He tucked them carefully into the folds of his worn tunic, close to his heart, a symbol of the resilience and life that no chains could imprison. Each seed was a quiet vow, a secret carried forward into an uncertain future. As the sky deepened into hues of gold and crimson, the garden glowed softly in the fading light. Lanterns flickered along the paths, their gentle flames echoing the quiet courage in Lucius's heart. The garden had been a sanctuary, a place where dreams were nurtured and whispered promises took root. Now it became a memory, a wellspring of strength to carry through the dark nights ahead. Lucius paused beneath the ancient olive tree, its twisted trunk a silent witness to generations past. He pressed his palm to its bark, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingers and the steady pulse of life within. The tree, like him, had weathered storms and endured seasons of hardship. It stood tall and proud, a testament to the power of quiet strength. With a final breath scented by the garden's fragrant blooms, Lucius looked back once more. The hidden sanctuary was fading into the shadows of evening, but its spirit would remain alive within him, and all who had found refuge there. The lessons of endurance, the whispers of the walls, the light of the lanterns, and the courage of the garden were woven into the fabric of his being. The path ahead was unknown, filled with challenges and uncertainties. Yet Lucius stepped forward with steady resolve, carrying the quiet strength of the garden within him. Guided by hope, nourished by memories, and sustained by an unyielding spirit, he was ready to face whatever dawn might bring. In the stillness of twilight, beneath a sky brushed with the first stars, Lucius walked away from the garden's embrace, not with sorrow, but with a gentle certainty that every ending was also a beginning, and that even in the darkest times, the light of hope would never fade. Hey guys, tonight we arrive at the final chapter of our journey, a gentle closing to the story of Lucius and the quiet strength found in a life bound by chains, yet full of hope. Before we begin, if you've enjoyed this tale, please take a moment to rate the story and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss the next adventure waiting to unfold. The night had fallen softly over Rome, wrapping the city in a velvet blanket strewn with countless stars. Above the domus, the sky shimmered like a vast sea of diamonds, each star a tiny beacon of light piercing the darkness. The cool breeze whispered gently through olive branches, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine and distant waves of the Tiber River. It was a night that seemed to hold 1,000 quiet promises, a moment suspended between past and future. Lucius lay on his simple cot, the warm fabric beneath him familiar and comforting. The day's heavy burdens had lifted, replaced now by a peaceful quiet that cradled his tired body and restless mind. The flickering glow of an oil lamp cast soft shadows on the stone walls, dancing like gentle spirits welcoming him into rest. His thoughts drifted through the memories that had sustained him, the whispering walls that held the stories of countless souls, the gentle glow of lanterns lighting secret paths, a hidden garden where life had flourished quietly against all odds. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of his soul, weaving a delicate fabric of hope, resilience, and unspoken dreams. Outside, the soft rustling of leaves mingled with the distant murmur of the city settling into sleep. Somewhere, a nightingale sang its soothing song, a melody that seemed to echo the quiet strength within Lucius's heart. The world felt vast yet intimately close, a tender reminder that even within the walls that confined him, there was a vastness of spirit and possibility. As his breathing slowed and deepened, the silent music of the hearth seemed to hum beneath the night, a lullaby woven from crackling embers and whispered prayers. The warmth of the fire's memory wrapped around him like a comforting shawl, easing the weight of his thoughts and carrying him gently toward dreams. Lucius imagined the faces of those who had come before ancestors, who had walked the same paths, faced the same trials, and nurtured the same hope. Their strength flowed through him, a quiet current that steadied his spirit and whispered of endurance. The chains that bound his body could never imprison the light of his soul. The stars above shone like silent guardians, their steady glow a testament to the enduring power of hope and the unbroken spirit of those who dared to dream. Lucius felt their presence like a gentle embrace, a reminder that no matter how dark the night, dawn was always near. In this gentle night's embrace, there were no masters, no chains, only the soft rustle of olive leaves, the murmur of distant waters, and the peaceful rhythm of a heart finally at rest. Tonight, Lucius was free in the quiet sanctuary of sleep, in the tender realm of dreams where possibilities bloomed like the jasmine under moonlight. With a final breath, Lucius surrendered to the gentle pull of sleep, carried on the wings of hope in the promise of new beginnings. Good night and sweet dreams.